But now we're going to turn to the profile emerging of the man charged overnight with murder in the fatal shooting of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The suspect, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, is an Ivy League graduate, a valedictorian at his all-boys prep school. According to charging documents, the officers who took Mangione into custody found a fake New Jersey driver's license and a 3D printed gun and silencer, similar to ones used in the December 4th shooting. There you see the pictures of both that apparently false driver's license and the weapon. Multiple law enforcement officials telling NBC News that a manifesto was found and it referenced the healthcare industry and read in part, "These parasites had it coming." His arrest comes after a 5-day multi-state manhunt that ended when the suspect was spotted at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
A guy came in the door, and I didn't really look at him. I thought it was everyone was kidding around. Well, the one guy said, "That looks like the shooter from New York."
Joining us now, NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter, Jim Cavanaugh, former ATF special agent in charge, and Frank Figliuzzi, former assistant director of counterintelligence at the FBI. So, Tom, what's the very latest on this? Authorities have already made a stream of evidence public. What are we learning so far today?
Right. So there's some information, Jose, that is public, and there's some information that is not public. As far as the public information, we're getting new images today from the Pennsylvania State Police that show this individual who's been taken into custody, Luigi Mangione. And this person in the images that they're putting out today, I think, is a big effort to try and track his most recent travels. And that's one of the reasons why the Pennsylvania State Police, you're looking here at a photo that was taken and provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, an effort to find out where he's been over the past several days, appearing to crisscross the state of Pennsylvania, at least perhaps on one occasion. As far as information that is not being made public, but the reporting on myself and colleague Jonathan Dienst, we have had 3 law enforcement officials describe to us these writings that have been included apparently or on his person at the time he was taken into custody. And I'll read you 2 specific quotes. "To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone." Quick note here, Jose, by the way, while authorities have said there's no indication that Mangione was working with anybody, they have not ruled out that either. The second quote is, "I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming." So basically, we can kind of characterize these writings, Jose. And by the way, they're only, they've talked about how there are 3 pages. They're only approximately 300 words in length. But we can characterize it as having criticized the broader healthcare industry in the United States, large corporations, and specifically UnitedHealthcare. So one other thing I think bears mentioning in this, Jose, is that there is concern in the law enforcement community, and this is universal. This was such a specific crime. And as we've seen, and as you've talked about, there is a portion of the community, certainly that we've seen online, that has championed the efforts here. I think it is important to point out that as a result of this, a father is dead, a husband is dead, and his funeral was held yesterday. And I think there's a real concern in the law enforcement community that folks might feel like they are compelled to act out similarly in the future. And I think that's a reason why you'll probably not hear as much information about this individual again. But there's definitely concern about that. And as far as the specific motive, that'll be something that'll come from prosecutors at some point or from law enforcement.
And Tom, so many questions, right? And I know that you are, if there's anybody who knows anything about this, it's you, Tom. But there's a lot of information still to gather from this. But so I'm thinking, so authorities said they found that backpack in Central Park, remember, which is the backpack that authorities at the time said looked like the backpack that the shooter was wearing when he shot Thompson. That's one thing. So then, when he was detained in that McDonald's in Pennsylvania, Tom, there was apparently another backpack that he had. And what are officials saying was in that backpack other than these 300 words, 3 pages in it? This is the one I'm talking about. So this was the one that authorities back then said they'd found in Central Park, that they believed, remember, it had some monopoly money in it, etc.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it had the monopoly money in it. It had a jacket as well. And this is the one that appears to be seen on that surveillance video that we've seen so many times of the alleged homicide here. So that's something that we've focused on before. We reported over the weekend and broke over the weekend that monopoly money was found there. Don't know yet what the connection is or what that was all about. And that there was obviously frantic searches. You and I talked about it all through the weekend, Jose, throughout Central Park. And I shouldn't say frantic. There was certainly a concerted effort and an urgent effort, but they were very well coordinated, both using drones as well as officers on the ground. And then later they put scuba divers into the ponds in the waters of Central Park. By the way, that water can be at some point so murky you really can't see. And so they just kind of have to feel around for any objects in the water to see if they could find that gun. They did not, but as we've now since learned from authorities, they allege that he had the weapon used in this, or at least a weapon, on his person, which was described to us as a ghost gun.
Tom Winter, thank you, my friend. And, of course, come back to us as soon as you get any updates on this case. I appreciate it. So, Jim, meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about that gun that was apparently found with this Mangione in that Pennsylvania McDonald's. And here's a picture of it. And, Jim, you tell us, I mean, it looks like it's a reproduction of a Glock, right? And they talked about 9mm rounds found at the scene of the crime. What does this tell you? And then it's not clearly a Glock. What could it be?
Yeah, well, it's a ghost gun because the police have told us it is, we know. And what happens is on many commercially manufactured firearms, the receiver, the lower receiver where you see the trigger and the handle that houses the magazine there, that's a polymer. I mean, that is, even from manufacturers, comes like that. It's lightweight, it's strong. And so it's the same true with the ghost gun. And then what they do is they affix a metal slide and a barrel, that's a real barrel on the top, to manufacture the gun. The ghost guns aren't illegal per se, but they're regulated like a regular firearm is. 8 states do prohibit them, but they're not federally prohibited. But they are prohibited if you're in the business of selling them or dispensing them or trying to manufacture them and for profit, and you need licenses. It gets very complicated. Silencers, on the other hand, you know, you can't make that silencer if it's a ghost silencer unless ATF approves it before you make it. So you would have to send your application, fingerprints, photograph in to make it. So it's probably a ghost silencer too and a ghost gun. And that was probably some of the reasons the thing was jamming, because it was, you know, it was a homemade pistol basically, whether he made it or he got it from somebody who made it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Frank, what does the evidence really so far tell you about this suspect's mindset or motive?
Yeah, the puzzle pieces are starting to come together, but still so many questions here. We've got a very bright young man who would have had a bright future, but he's also disturbed. His social media postings are indicative of some real delving into some dark places, including aligning himself with some of the ideology of the Unabomber. He's read his manifesto fairly recently. He's reviewed it and even concluded that there are times ethically when you can murder someone and still be moral, particularly around corporate greed. So we can see that. We see references in some of his social media to mental illness treatment, but no evidence that that's about him necessarily. We do see he read a book or was about to read a book about back pain, and specifically the theme of that book being you're going to get kind of strung along by the medical system if you have chronic back pain. So that could be the connection. But still, we're still looking for that direct connection to UnitedHealthcare. I'm certain that corporate security at United is poring over files to see if they ever insured him, ever declined a claim from him, and we'll wait to hear that. But this is someone who had a cause. This is not a cold-blooded killer in the sense that he had a personal passion about somebody, but rather he's got a large ideology against corporate, and particularly in the healthcare industry.
And so, and I'm just thinking, Frank, I mean, you were so involved in that Unabomber case, right? What are some of the things that you were able to glean back then as to the human nature involved in someone, you know, Unabomber also apparently really smart and really prepared. What is it about these people that takes them from becoming upset about the general, as you were talking about, picture, to going to carrying out an act of death?
There's often throughout history been a fascinating link between an extremely high IQ and some issues regarding mental health. That was certainly true for the Unabomber, who was brilliant, attended Harvard at age 16, and you know, published this lengthy manifesto, which our killer here has read. But when everybody was ready to apprehend him and so excited about an interview to finally get the cause, the reason, and he looks at the agents and he goes, I was really upset with the airplanes flying over my cabin in Montana. So that's the result of the bombing of American Airlines executives and et cetera. So it may make sense to him, but it may make no sense to us. And that's what we have to be prepared for.